What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's trade recap or market analysis session. Today is April the 25th, and today's session will be a pretty quick one because we took one trade today and we hopped on the market a bit late. And we took one trade and we got wicked out before our trade went to our take profit. But realistically, we should not have taken this trade anyways, and we'll dive into why as well. So first, let's give some overall context on the market on NQ and ES. Ignore these red things right there. I just marked out some pivot points that I saw when I was trading during the live session. But what I essentially saw was that price started rallying and shifting towards the upward trend mechanic, right? We did have liquidity down here as well. I just don't know why it's not marked. And we essentially wanted to, it was pretty apparent with momentum that we wanted to move upwards and sweep these liquidity levels upwards. But one thing was that our point of control was down here at this high volume node area. But since we were struggling to break this relative area, we may seek higher where another high volume node was around these levels right here. So we marked out all our levels, our supply zones, and that's going to be essentially the same for ES as well. As you can see, we had our levels marked. One other interesting thing was down at these lows, what we saw on ES was that we sweep this lower liquidity down here. And after a sweep of that lower liquidity, we started rallying towards the upside, towards our upper liquidity by 55, 50. And that was a key level and key target for the day as well. And I'll explain all of this to you in more depth in just a minute. So now if you go down to the shorter time frames, what we see is that once this sweep of liquidity, we started moving towards the upside. And then what we were looking for is we were looking on Bookmap, right? And what we saw in Bookmap at that time was that we saw absorption down at these lows, right? And we started moving back up. And now we have this barrier in the way at around 5,500, right? So I was thinking, oh, maybe if we break this level, we can continue going up all the way to 55.50, where a large amount of liquidity was placed on the Bookmap. Now, one error with this was that buyers were not showing clear support for the upside quite yet, because look what's happening up here. Sellers are forming barriers, and the overall spread of liquidity in real time was more seller focused, absorbing a lot of this buying action that has been taking place. Additionally, we should not have entered this trade because from these lows down here, a good trade would have actually been, in hindsight, right? This is a good trade. I'm giving you guys an example of a good trade setup in hindsight, right? Would have been to enter longs after a sweep of this liquidity, right? Because what did we see? We saw that we had Bookmap liquidity down here, and we had chart liquidity. So our chart liquidity and Bookmap liquidity lined up to form a great confluence within the market. And typically when you have something that aligns that well, it is a higher impact or higher value to us as traders. And you can clearly see that Bookmap liquidity right there. First time we got near that level, these sellers were clearly getting absorbed. Second time as well, look at all this selling action coming in, but right at these lows, all this selling action gets absorbed and we start moving up as well, creating 711 stop buys. Now, let's talk about once again why this trade, we should not have taken this trade. We entered on a breakout of this opposing barrier, right? But buyers were not holding, like I mentioned, and we shouldn't have entered because even though we broke this, there's really nothing in our playbook that says that you should enter once a break up, because there's no clear support or confirmation that will continue going up even if the barrier has been broken. We need something to actually show us that there's reason to go higher, whether that be a strong target with barriers or icebergs, or that could simply be an introduction of a strong barrier down here that we could head down into and then head upwards again. But we are not seeing any of that, so because of that, ideally we should have stayed out because there was no catalyst indicating us to stay in. Even if we did enter, we could have got an exit here because we were not seeing what we wanted to see. But that's definitely something we can improve on in the future. Now, it does look like price did exactly what we wanted it to do in the rest of the session. It went straight to 5500 level on ES. And look at that, right from that 5500 level, we started seeing major sell-off. So our levels for today were literally sniper levels, and that's really good. And it's also quite crazy that at these levels, Trump was speaking, and because of what Trump said, price started dumping very hard. I don't really know if this is going to be considered a... I don't know how to explain this, but like, yeah, I don't think that you can necessarily consider this completely true because of our levels. We continued to move down because Trump was speaking at this time. But is this really a coincidence? This happens a lot, and maybe it's because we need to take this liquidity, and with that liquidity that we have taken, then we can push down even higher. So maybe liquidity can be a strong area for news to actually happen as well. Just keep that in mind moving forward as well. I mean, that's essentially it for my trade recap for today. But I do want to give you guys something more. And what I'm going to do is, I marked out these pivot points right here, which I noticed. Likely could have marked out this one as well, but that's after 10:30. So we'll stick to these two pivot points. And we're going to analyze this on footprint and bookmap as well. So first, let's take a look at this pivot point right here, and then we'll talk about the optimal pivot point down here, which you noticed, and why this could have been a great entry if you entered there. So at 10:20, once again, shout out to Alex with Liquid Bookmap, great tool. Highly recommend you guys to check it out for free live bookmap streams, which you can use. So if you move forward to that 8:20 time, okay, right here, yeah, so it's really apparent what is going on here. If you guys don't see what's going on, you guys will start getting a hang of this as you get more screen time and learn more of these concepts. But what I see is that every time we break this level and come around these relative areas, what do we see happening to buyers? We see buyers gaining lots of volume near the top, but these buyers cannot continue to go upwards. Right around this liquidity level, what is happening is that buyers are getting absorbed by a passive seller in the market. And even though that passive seller is not limit orders, someone is likely selling at these levels, trying to not allow buyers to push through. And because of that, because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key factors and key points where buyers got absorbed, I'm definitely expecting some type of pivot from this point. And that's why I marked it out, right? And if you would look at that, we got a nice pivot. And actually, this is a quite good pivot because look at where we ended up at the end. We went straight for our pivot location, which we identified in live time. And from that location, sellers came in with incredible strength. And where did it went to? It went straight to our clear target that was identified on Bookmap because it had lots of liquidity right at 5,500. This is essentially textbook, and Understanding the spread of liquidity on Bookmap can really help you understand this. We essentially went from one liquidity level with clear confirmation that buyers were getting absorbed. Then we went down to our lower level, where now if you look at it, it does look like there's clear confirmation that sellers are getting absorbed at these levels as well. Because look at the first tap. Look at that big red sell volume right at the bottom. And we came back and sellers are still not able to break through this level. Definitely indicating that price could potentially continue higher. But at this time, it's after peak market hours and we typically stay out. But if we did stay in, a potential opportunity could have presented itself there as well. So that's enough for that pivot point that we discussed, where you could have easily taken shorts from there. Not easily, but that's hindsight, and you should never take hindsight into account. But looking back at it, this area was an easily identifiable pivot point, and there definitely could have been setups in place that individuals could have taken at that level as well. Now, down at this level, let's talk about why this could have been a great trade. If you just look at this level, right? What happened here at this level? Well, if you look on ES again, this was actually a level where we swept liquidity on Bookmap, the chart liquidity, and we also tapped into Bookmap liquidity. Those two combined is a very, very strong confirmation, not confirmation, but confluence, and essentially a catalyst that is of higher significance than other confluences that we see just simply because they line up so well. Now, if we look onto Bookmap as well, at 9:30 a.m. CST, we see that price comes down to the liquidity on Bookmap, very apparent. And down at these levels, it is also very apparent that sellers are getting absorbed. Look at what we see here. First touch point, we see sellers come in with massive volume, struggle to push down below. Massive buyer icebergs get introduced. Second time we come down, again, large selling volume that can't continue to push down. Then sellers push one final time and clearly get absorbed. Right as they touch into this level, sellers start transitioning. Now we have more buying pressure. This could have been a good trade because you could have entered somewhere around here where you started seeing the sellers get broken out. And simply from here, you could have taken a 1 to 1.5 risk reward trade, which would have provided you pretty good trade, right? And your first DP would be this 5500 level, which was actually the area which we entered from a breakout of, which now if you look on hindsight does not make too much sense. But this bottom trade from a pivot point would have been a pretty nice trade to take, and definitely one to seek and look for when you look for it as well. Using this idea of absorption definitely helps us understand if a level on Bookmap will get broken or it will stay. Because if you don't see absorption like thus, it's likely that it can result in a reversal. But if we don't see absorption, like we don't see on this 5500 level, because look at the top, although we do see buying pressure occur, it's not necessarily right up at the highs, and we're trading between bears. Potentially there was buyer absorption there, but that was newly introduced passive selling liquidity. Now we've introduced it, and look what we're doing over here. We're stalling with the buys, but sellers are not coming in as well. Now, this is less volume than we've seen with the sellers. So we're just stalling. Now, it looks like passive buyers are lightly coming in at this area. And then we start seeing a push up. High volume buyers come in. And we actually break out pretty nicely. Because there's not such high significance evidence of absorption, there's more of a probability that this level gets broken through. Now, I think that's enough for the footprint analysis that we've done today. Actually, we did not do footprint analysis. That's quite interesting, but let's just do some footprint analysis too, I guess. So 9:30, if we hop on the footprint chart, let's take a look at what we see down here. What we saw was that, look at these lows, right? What do we see happening here at these lows? Down at these lows, you see large amounts of seller delta coming in, much more than the buyers. Although we do see this decent sized buyer delta load, there is heavy selling that is coming at this level. And even though heavy selling is coming in, price is not able to continue to break through, and we're seeing divergence between candles, especially on these 3 candles actually. Look at the wicks here, right? Lots of seller delta at the bottom, but price keeps waking up at this area, being a key indicator that there was passive buyers. But on the footprint charts during this time, I wouldn't use it as such high confidence because I don't see as much as I would like it to see in a divergence, but definitely add some sort of confidence. Now if you move up to where we entered, there was not much there, but if we move up to that selling point which I talked about prior, right, at 1020, take a look at what happened up at those highs as well, right? At these highs, it was so clear what was happening, right? Look at all this heavy buying delta that we have seen around here. Buying delta is coming in and price closed pretty strongly. Now the next candle, price went all the way down here, right? But then price continued back up again. Now, it's not too evident up until this point, but now again, we pushed up again, up to these highs, trying to break these levels. But price continued to struggle, even with buying pressure occurring in the market. Price was unable to break this relative area. Now, in the next candle, sellers were able to come in and push the price downwards. And that's what we saw right there. That's essentially it for today. We did some footprint analysis and quick analysis via footprint and order flow. We talked about how you could spot some sort of absorption on bookmap. Like, remember this is that early one, and we discussed it on footprint as well. This is when we saw large amount of selling delta near the bottom, which was not able to get rewarded, pushing price to go up as we absorbed our sellers. And then the second one we talked about, that was later on, we saw how buying was actually getting absorbed, pushing price downwards through divergence. But that's all I can say here for today. I do want to say that through these next few days, I'm definitely going to try to increase the production and quality of the educational videos, because those have been gaining a decent amount of traction, and with a higher quality amount, I feel like you guys can gain more from it, and it can be a more enjoyable and learning experience for you all. And yeah, that's it. Expect around 2 to 3 educational videos over these next 2 to 3 days, and expect a pre-week analysis on Sunday as well. I guess I'll see you guys then. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below, or I highly recommend you guys to join the Discord for completely free. The link is in the description. That's it for today. This is V2 Trading, and I'll see you guys on Sunday for a pre-week analysis session, and I'll see you guys throughout for our educational videos. Goodbye. I'll see you then.